Welcome in to the Rochford Files on a sunny Saturday afternoon from the Mile Highland City. It's your host. That's kind of between the coast. It's Andrew Rochford. And Saturday afternoon. I know that not exactly the most optimal time here, but sometimes you just gotta do something different from time to time and have a different feel to things, so to speak. So, a few good things to talk about on today's show. We'll be starting off with Jon Stewart, then we'll go into Andrew Yang, then the absurdity of the worship of Vladimir Zelinsky and the whole Vogue magazine shoot him and his wife just had released earlier in the week, and that Congressional baseball game. So that's the rundown for today's stuff. Also, please like, share, and subscribe to if you're on YouTube. Click the follow button if you're up on Twitch. And I just joined Locals. I just set up a Locals account last night. So, as a content creator, and let's see what. So I'm about to, and I know that was still pending when I first started it. But yeah, let's just take the time to share the Locals page real quick. So here it is. So now I just got approved for Locals. So here's I'll eventually put some post up on here, but it was pending before I went to bed, but now it's up. So I'll be able to maybe do a random segment on there sometime next week. But I need to really figure out a new platform to try to be on, because I'm not quite ready to pay the $9.99 a month to live stream on Rumble. Maybe I'll reconsider it over time. But yeah, it's still not available to all users just yet. But once that moment comes, I will probably make Rumble like the third platform until I'm able to get somewhere on Rockfin. So that's why it'd be nice to get more subscribers, because even if I could I've seen people who get like a couple hundred subscribers more than this channel currently has, and they got on Rockfin just recently, like Political Matrix and Extra Bulla, Uncle Warren. Those are two channels. They've only got like about 200 or so more subscribers than me, so that would be much appreciated if someone could figure out a way to help boost this channel. I know it all can't be done on my own, but hopefully in time that will happen. So let's get started with we'll go with Jon Stewart first. Do more of a warm-up segment, and save a hotter story for uh, a bit down the line. So Jon Stewart went in on veterans. So let's start with this video.
So ain't this a bitch? Ain't this a bitch? America's heroes who fought in our wars, outside sweating their asses off, with oxygen, battling all kinds of ailments, while these motherfuckers sit in the air conditioning, walled off from any of it. They don't have to hear it. They don't have to see it. They don't have to understand that these are human beings. Do you get it yet?
Yes. For those of us on the left, really do get it. Because what war essentially is to the United States is you're fighting in some other country to steal their assets, like oil, and oil being the big one, and drugs. That's what it means these days to go to war and be a veteran. It's not, since there hasn't been a real defensive war in a long ass motherfucking time.
Do we see that these aren't heroes? These are men and women, mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers that we just let stand outside in the heat when they can't breathe. I'm going to read you something. This is beautiful. I'm going to read you something beautiful. You know what? I said a curse word, and I'm sorry about that. That was my fault. Let me say something beautiful. This is a tweet from Senator Rick Scott of Florida from yesterday. It's beautiful. And I'm sorry about the cursing, and let me say something beautiful to make it up to you. I was honored to join the USO today and make care packages for our brave military members in gratitude. In gratitude.
Just know that they wouldn't allow Jon Stewart to be up there if he was going to say a real anti-war, anti-imperialist message. And that USO hat should be a dead giveaway of that.
Of their sacrifice and service to our nation. And there's a beautiful picture. I wish you could see it. He's standing with a little package. Did you get the package? I think it has M&Ms in it and some cookies and some moist towelettes. I don't even know, honestly, I don't even know what to say. I've been coming down here 10, 15 years. I'm used to the hypocrisy. Christina Keene will tell you from VFW. She sat in an office with Mitch McConnell and a war veteran from Kentucky, and he looked that man in the eyes and he said, he lied to him. Because Mitch McConnell yesterday flipped. I'm used to the lies. I'm used to the hypocrisy. Senator Pat Toomey won't take a meeting with the veterans groups. Sends out his chief of staff. I'm used to the cowardice. Been here a long time. Senate's where accountability goes to die. These people don't care. They're never losing their jobs. They're never losing their health care. Pat Toomey didn't lose his job. He's walking away. God knows what kind of pot of gold he's stepping into to lobby this government to shit on more people. I'm used to all of it, but I'm not used to cruelty. They passed it. June 16th, they passed the PACT Act. 84 to 14. You don't even see those scores in the Senate anymore. They passed it. Every one of these individuals that has been fighting for years, standing on the shoulders of Vietnam veterans who have been fighting for years, standing on the shoulders of Persian Gulf War veterans fighting for years, Desert Storm veterans to just get the health care and benefits that they earned from their service. And I don't care if they were fighting for our freedom. I don't care if they were fighting for the flag. I don't care if they were fighting because they wanted to get out of a drug treatment center or it was jail or the army. I don't give a shit. They lived up to their oath. And yesterday, they spit on it.
See why the going to war is such a grift in this whole money-making racket that this ruling class has us under. And the fact that you're not even guaranteed to get the carrot that they're dangling in front of you. I mean, a big reason why a lot of people do it is for the free college education, but the fact that they can, and it also shows you how seriously committed they are to being anti-healthcare in this country. They'll not only do it to regular folks like us, but they'll also make sure that the veterans won't get their health care, especially the ones who are suffering from the PSTD, from all that on the ground, the trauma from the ground action they were on.
In abject cruelty. These people thought they could finally breathe. You think their struggles end because the PACT Act passes? All it means is they don't have to decide between their cancer drugs and their house. Their struggle continues. Gives them health care, gives them benefits, lets them live.
What Jon Stewart isn't mentioning, and what I doubt he's going to mention in this clip, is all the veterans who go in there from marginalized communities, then they get treated like shit when they go back. Because at the end of the day, it didn't matter that they went to war for the United States. What matters is what they are. It doesn't even matter if they have their military uniform on. They can still be treated like shit.
From becoming addicts keeps veterans from committing suicide.
Senator Toomey's not going to hear that because he won't sit down with this man. Because he is a fucking coward. You hear me? A coward. And like I say, I'm used to it. But this type of cruelty on those that we say we hold up as our most valued Americans, then what are we? Pat Toomey stood up there, Patriot Pat Toomey, excuse me, I'm sorry. I want to give him his propers. I want to make sure that I give him his propers. Patriot Pat Toomey stood on the floor and said, this is a slush fund. They're going to use $400 billion to spend on whatever they want. That's nonsense. I call bullshit. This isn't a slush fund. You know what's a slush fund? The OCO, the Overseas Contingency Operations Fund. $60 billion, $70 billion every year on top of $500 billion, $600 billion, $700 billion of a defense budget. That's a slush fund. Unaccountable, no guardrails. Did Pat Toomey stand up and say, this is irresponsible, the guardrails? No, not one of them did. They vote for it year after year after year. You don't support the troops, you support the war machine. That's all you care about. Boy, they haven't met a war they won't sign up for, and they haven't met a veteran they won't screw over. What the fuck are we? And now they're going to go away. Pat Toomey says, I've got veterans groups behind me. I call bullshit. These are the veterans groups. VFW, American Legion, IAVA, Wounded Warriors, DAV, AMVETS. They're all here. This is the veterans community, Senator. They don't stand behind you. In fact, you won't let them stand in front of you. Cowards all. Cowards all. Now they say, well, this will get done. Maybe in the, after we get back from our summer recess, maybe during the lame duck, because they're on Senate time. Do you understand? You live around here. Senate time is ridiculous. These motherfuckers live to 200. They're tortoises. They live forever, and they never lose their jobs, and they never lose their benefits, and they never lose all those things. Well, they're not on Senate time. They're on human time, cancer time. Don't you have families? Don't you have people who are deciding how to live their last moments? I know some of them. They've been down here advocating with us. They spent their remaining time advocating so that other soldiers didn't have to face the indignities and the depravity and the desperation that they faced. And none of them will hear it. And none of them care. Except to tweet, boy, they'll tweet it. Can't wait to see what they come up with on Veterans Day, on Memorial Day. Well, this is the reality of it. I honestly don't even know what to say anymore, but we need your help because we're not leaving. These people cannot go away. I don't know if you know this. You know, obviously I'm not a military expert. I didn't serve in the military, but from what I understand, you're not allowed to just leave your post when the mission isn't completed. Apparently you take an oath. You swear an oath, and you can't leave. But these folks can leave because they're on Senate time. Go ahead, go home, spend time with your families, because these people can't do it anymore. So they can't leave until this gets done. Because these people will not give up, they will not give in, and they will not relent. This is an embarrassment to the Senate, to the country, to the founders, and all that they profess to hold dear. And if this is America first, then America is fucked.
So the last 3 minutes of it was a pretty decent part of the rant. I mean, he actually did kind of call out politicians for the way they're in action. But at the same time, this much of the speech was very Republican-centric focused type of criticism. So there's a bit of the left who called this a really based rant. And this was honestly a pretty mid one. Because if Jon Stewart was really about us, he isn't the Jon Stewart that hosted The Daily Show. He's now a watered down version of himself. I mean, if Jon Stewart really spoke to the issues that were important to the left, he wouldn't be on C-SPAN anymore. He wouldn't have the Apple TV show. No, if Jon Stewart was going to go full on scorched earth, he would be in the same place that many of us would be, using the YouTubes, the Twitch, the Rockfin, Rumble. That's where Jon Stewart's message would be relegated to. And Russell Brand is an example of this. Because if Russell Brand was just if he was more the mainstream politics type of guy, That guy could be on Comedy Central right now. But since he's more of an independent-minded person, there's a reason why he's in the big-time podcast sphere. And also think the inherent flaw of advocating for veterans' health care is that you don't connect it to trying to end the wars. I mean, Jon Stewart did take a bit of time to mention that these motherfuckers haven't met a war that they don't like. But I don't think Jon Stewart is going to follow all the way through into making sure that no one else has to go to war. I mean, let's be honest. The United States is so established as an empire. We could go we could go the rest of my lifetime, the rest of our millennials' children's lifetimes, then the lifetimes of their children, and just be and have people in defense training, and probably no one would fuck with the United States. Let's be real about that. That's how established of a world superpower that they have become. Which is why, if Jon Stewart really wanted to be serious here, he wouldn't just stop at advocating for veterans' health care. He would also be on board with trying to abolish the military-industrial complex. I mean, 90% budget cut is where I'm at right now. And I fully support anyone who wants to go higher than that too. And it's also another type of half measure because Jon Stewart also isn't using this opportunity to help everyone get health care as well, like the March for Medicare for All that's going on right now in Washington, D.C. These are things to point out because when the connections are being made, it means that there's a reason for it. And if Jon Stewart made those extra connections, then his status would be threatened. And I don't think Jon Stewart is fully ready for that. So let's shift gears next to Andrew Yang, as they've just now announced the formation of the Forward Party. And I think that's important to get into discussion about in a moment. All right, let's. I think I'm just going to go with scroll through the tweet search on Yang because I don't really want to read one of those full ass articles about it. But I may play a video if one pops out of interest. And let's go here. And we'll reload the page to. Hold on a moment. I'm going to be right back. All right, I'm back. Tried to let the dog stay loose downstairs, but that didn't work out for much longer. So I think there's a good video somewhere that we can react to on this. So let's just see what he says here.
To make it really specific, if people on the right say the Republican Party is too centrist, I'm an extreme white supremacist or something like that. But I think we need to get, we need single transferable vote or whatever in campaign. You still welcome that because you're on the same page on that one issue.
Yeah, if they're going to help us transition to a more effective democracy, but I don't need to know what their stance is on things that I disagree with. People have a sense of where I'm coming from.
Okay.
But right now, I believe that there is an existential threat to the country as a result of the greatest design flaw in the history of the world. And if you will help us resolve that design flaw, then we can have a discussion about anything else under the sun at a time when the democracy actually will stand the test of time.
To make it.
So what Andrew Yang is referring to right there is the whole money interest into politics. But what you'll notice is some of the people that he has brought into the fold are very much many of the same people who are part of the same moneyed interest. And this is why the idea of his third party is ultimately stupid, because he's trying to bullshit you into making you think he's different when it comes to politics. But the reality is, he's really just someone who continues to mix up all the same old branding. Like, there's parts of him that are very much establishment Democrat, and there's a lot of establishment Republican parts to him. And at the same time, there's like some classic libertarian values mixed in. And he's trying to shine that shit up into and brand it as something new and unique. And many of us can see right through that shit. And I think that mayor run he attempted last year really showed you that the lack of difference that he has in comparison to just your average neoconservative Democrat. Like, he pretty much was trying to out Eric Adams, and it didn't work well enough for him, because no matter how much he tried to be like Eric Adams to win that mayoral race last year, he wasn't. And if he tries to be the best version of like a Gary Johnson that he could be, then that's not going to help him win in either of the two major parties either. So there's definitely a lot of pointless mission that I feel like Andrew Yang is trying to set forward here. You know what? I'm going to queue up that Humanist Report just to see what he says, because I feel like that'll be a reasonable place to go with this segment, since I saw that YouTube link pop up a lot for him. So let's go there. Mike had a very hilarious video trying to describe the whole AOC getting arrested type thing, and I wonder if this clip is going to provide some of that, even though this will probably be one of those moments where it's closer in agreement than rather than disagreement. But let's play a bit of it and find out. But just know Mike Figueiredo is also someone who is very much anti-third party.
Let's talk about Andrew Yang. Andrew Yang is an individual who is unquestionably nice. I talked to him before he came on the podcast. But the problem is that when it comes to politics, he's just lost. At best, he's ideologically inconsistent. At worst, his ideology is just incoherent. So as you might have heard about, he formed this new party called the Forward Party. Now, before I talk about it, let me hear how he describes it, courtesy of MSNBC, where they read an op-ed from the Washington Post written by Andrew Yang along with his associates.
A new centrist group is gambling that millions of Americans are fed up with this country's two-party system. They're announcing the creation of a third political party to be called Forward. In a Washington Post op-ed this evening, the party's founders, David Jolly, Christine Todd Whitman, and Andrew Yang, write the following. The two major parties have hollowed out the sensible center of our political system, even though that is where most voters want to see the move. A new party must stake out the space in between.
Just know that the Overton window in the United States is so far shifted to the right that the whole sensible center isn't even anywhere that the Democratic Party is close to. They're a medium right-wing party right now, and that's being generous about that, when they're really only a few steps away from being very close to the so-called Republican who get called extremist. Just know that Democrats are very close to that same type of extremism as well. Democrats are more right-wing than many of the right-wing parties in like Canada, Britain, France, you name it. And the Democrats are more right than many of those countries' right-wing parties. And there is a place where, and just being a real moderate party would be to the left of Democrats. But the thing is, libertarians pretty essentially already occupy the same damn space that this so-called Forward Party is supposedly doing. And that's why it's a pretty pointless exercise, because I've said before that Andrew Yang would probably just be more successful trying to raise the profile of the Libertarian Party if he was really serious here.
Okay, so the goal is to form this new party that is going to be between Republicans and Democrats. So the question is, how exactly is this an alternative? Because it's not. It's just more of the same. Because consider this. Republicans are on the far right. Democrats are on the center right. So if you're in between the far right and the center right, you're just right wing. So if you're trying to capture this group of voters who are disillusioned with both political parties, I understand the need to fill that void, but you're going about it in the completely wrong way, because people aren't upset with Democrats and Republicans because there aren't enough people between Democrats and Republicans. They're upset with Democrats and Republicans because neither party represents the working class. Both parties are neoliberal. That means that they propose nothing but private solutions to public problems. Healthcare system broken? Let's just throw more money at the private system that we currently have. Education system not going too well. Funding disproportionately hurts Black Americans since we base that on zip codes. And, you know, it seems like our education system is broken. Let's just throw more money at charter schools. This is the neoliberal ethos. So, this is what both parties represent. So if you're trying to find some center point between Republicans and Democrats, you are literally offering nothing new. It's more of the same, albeit in a new package, right? If you actually want to offer voters an alternative, it would be to the left of the Democratic Party. That would truly be centrist, because center is the center point between voters on the left and the right. And both parties are not an accurate representation of the electorate. But voters support these parties overwhelmingly because that's the only two options. So is the goal to just have another party so voters can flock to that in hopes that they won't recognize that they're getting more of the same? Or are we going to prioritize quality over quantity and actually offer working class voters a meaningful alternative? That's what I want, but that's not what Andrew Yang is representing. And
just know, even though there isn't much to disagree with on Mike Figueiredo in this moment, that this will come off as very platitude because of the fact that there's eventually going to be a moment where he's going to smear the Green Party. The People's Party is pretty much a joke and done for. And yes, I have given some criticisms to both aspects of those main two left-wing parties. I mean, the PSL isn't really on a national radar per se, so there isn't really anything worth trying to say on that front. But just know that when it's ultimately said and done, Mike's now just going to lead you into the lesser of two evils when it comes to election time.
And even with his own description of it being like between Democrats and Republicans, when you read who's part of this party, that even doesn't quite fit the bill because they seem like a Republican light party. So as Reuters reports, dozens of former Republican and Democratic officials announced on Wednesday a new national political third party to appeal to millions of voters they say are dismayed with what they see as America's dysfunctional two-party system. The new party, called Forward, and whose creation was first reported by Reuters, will initially be co-chaired by former Democratic presidential candidate Andrew Yang and Christine Todd Whitman, the former Republican governor of New Jersey. They hope the party will become a viable alternative to the Republican and Democratic parties that dominate U.S. politics, founding members told Reuters. The new party is being formed by a merger of three political groups that have emerged in recent years as a reaction to America's increasingly polarized and gridlocked political system. The leaders cited a Gallup poll last year showing a record 2/3 of Americans believe a third party is needed. The merger involves the Renew America movement, formed in 2021 by dozens of former officials in the Republican administrations of Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump. The Forward Party, founded by Yang, who left the Democratic Party in 2021 and became an independent, and the Serve America movement, a group of Democrats, Republicans, and independents, whose executive director is former Republican Congressman David Jolly. The party, which is centrist, has no specific policies yet. It will say at its Thursday launch how we will solve the big issues facing America. Not left, not right, forward. So based on what we're seeing, this party is...
So let's sift through the bullshit right here. Now, when you see the people that Andrew Yang associates with, it makes much more sense why he wouldn't try to become part of the Libertarian Party, per se. I mean, look at where his status is in society. He's not going to... And look at how supportive of, like, U.S. war and imperialism he is. I mean, that became really damn clear once he outed himself as another pro-Israel politician last year during the whole runoff election for mayor.
Is disproportionately comprised of Republicans, including individuals from George W. Bush's administration and Donald Trump's administrations. A war criminal and another war criminal, but also somebody who tried to stage a coup. I mean, this just seems like another Republican-led party that is going to serve the interests of corporate America. So my question is, what is the point? if you're trying to pick up disillusioned voters, do you honestly think that you're going to win them over by just saying, hey, here's the same thing, albeit in a new package? I mean, maybe some voters will fall for it. Maybe they're banking on voters being too stupid to realize that they're getting the same pro-capitalist neoliberal policies. But overall, this is not going to be conducive to meaningful change. Now, do we need a third party? Yes, we need a fourth party, a fifth party, a sixth party. But they're putting the cart before the horse here, because if you genuinely want a third party that's viable, you can't just say, here's our new party. You could turn this organization first into a movement to actually secure electoral reform, because that's how you get a third party that's actually electorally viable. It's called Duverger's law. In a winner-take-all majoritarian system like we have, it's always going to come down to two parties. So in the best-case scenario, the forward party, assuming it's able to accumulate power, wouldn't necessarily be a third option, probably. It would likely be absorbed by Democrats or, more likely, Republicans.
And you see here, he did very much the same spiel when he turned on the People's Party. It's the whole, oh, you got to do so much fucking work to give a party just even a chance to do something on a national level. And he's going to list reasons A, B, C, D, F, G, X, Y, J, Z, and whatnot. And try to use that as a reason to discourage people from investing any time and energy into it. And the fact that a third party really doesn't have to win anything in order to pull one of these major parties in a different direction. It just has to be a solid foundational tool of leverage. And if you've heard me talk about this, it's going to have to be a major committed tool. It can't just be like vote once. We'll get 10, 15% one time, and 13% of them jump back to the Democrats. And they're like, don't have to do shit now, you're back. Because, let's be real, they're not going to do any, Democrats or Republicans aren't going to do anything outside of their comfort level until they feel like they have to. And if you stay a committed third-party voter, they're eventually going to have to reverse the leverage dynamics where the potential is that we keep getting them to cave into our demands, then continuously squeeze more and more out of it. But with Mike here, he's just going to tell you to not waste your time with it, because it's not going to help you win. And I don't measure winning through whether you have a chance to win an election. I measure winning through whatever means you have to do to help get a policy established. And there's a lot of ways to do that without winning damn elections.
So that's the best case scenario if you don't support electoral reform first. I desperately want more options. But really, it's not just about quantity. Again, this is about quality. I guess I just don't understand the point of this. Again, if you turn this into an organization to campaign for electoral reform, perhaps at the state level, where you introduce reforms in each state, create model legislation that would reform our system, make it more proportional. I would love to not have a presidential system. I think shifting to a parliamentary system would be much, much better. They're more.
Well, the thing is, there's already some well-known movements at state levels, like the ranked choice voting, and there's still people that are trying to do the Medicare for all state by state, even though in the United States that is going to be a counterproductive action. The whole state by state solution thing. I mean, in Canada it worked better, and there's still some people who think it's going to work the same here, but the truth is it's really not, and it's really just going to add to the multi-tiered systems of the state rights in the same way that state rights are being used in this women's bodily autonomy with Roe versus Wade being overturned.
Effective. They're just overall more functional. I think that's probably not possible, but like within the scope of what's possible in the United States, you could push for proportional representation. You could push for ranked choice voting, or better yet, STV, standard transferable vote. I'm not going to get into what that is, but it's essentially ranked choice voting, but much more proportional, much more representative. But I mean, they're just going to jump into electoral politics without trying to reform the system that makes it really difficult for third parties to thrive. And that doesn't make sense. And even their premise doesn't make sense. So going back to that, let's look at their platform. You'll find a couple of policies, but mostly vague platitudes. Free people, revitalize a culture that celebrates difference and individual choice, rejects hate, and removes barriers so that each of us can rise to our full potential. Sounds lovely. Thriving communities.
Yeah, very much. Free people is just like this capitalist false sense of freedom mantra. But the thing is, these capitalists have done a very effective job of convincing people that they're better off being cogs for the system rather than like pushing for unionization and more like collective rights for all of us.
Invigorate a fair, flourishing economy and open society where everyone can live a good life and is safe in the places where we learn, work, and live. Vibrant democracy. Reform our republic to give Americans more choices in elections, more confidence in government that works, and more say in our future. And the only policies that they list are ranked choice voting, nonpartisan primaries, and independent redistricting committees. Now, that last one, independent redistricting commissions, that's what the Democratic Party proposed. So there's already over...
I mean, we've already got the whole independent redistricting in Colorado. I mean, it's a small thing, but it's not like this transformational type thing that you would think it would be. And given how rigged the system is, let's just say, for example, a Democrat, that there was more independent redistricting in the gerrymandered states. That would just slant the system the other way, where Democrats just block even more progressive candidates than they already do now.
Overlap with the existing two parties. And there's already a platitude over policies party in the Democratic Party. So again, I ask, what is the point of this party? And if you truly have this vision, what policies will you introduce to make this vision a reality? It's about policies, not vibes. It's about policies, not platitudes. But for Andrew Yang, I mean, I don't want to say this because it's pretty mean, and I'm being a little bit, I guess, uncharitable here, but it feels like this is a grift to bolster his own profile. So in the event he wants to run for president, he can do that using the Forward Party. And I mean, he knows probably that he's not going to win in a third party. But you can boost your public profile, sell more books, launch podcasts, or, attract donors for whatever venture you choose to pursue, whether that's, some sort of capitalist venture or organizational venture. I mean, this just seems like a joke. I'm sorry, but it is. It's a fucking...
I mean, Mike isn't exactly wrong here to call out the unseriousness of this party, but he's just out platituding the platitude platform of that the Forward Party is espousing right here.
Joke. If you actually want to offer voters an alternative, that party must be anti-capitalist and vehemently pro-working class. We have two parties that already represent corporate interests. So if you can construct a party exclusively to the benefit of working class Americans, pro-unionization, pro-worker rights, anti-capitalist, explicitly so, then you'll form an alternative. But even if...
Well, at the same time, Mike is gonna, when it's ultimately decision time, when a party out there actually has that platform and they don't have like the structural organizational flaws he's going to tell you to vote for the Democratic candidates instead. So this is why this is empty messaging from him.
If you form that alternative, even if this party is good, you have to get it to a place where it's viable in our electoral system. And right now, we're not there. So electoral reform should be priority number one for any third-party advocate. But they're, again, putting the cart before the horse, and they're putting the platitudes before the policies, which I really don't like. So overall, I don't see the point, and it just feels like this is doomed to fail, but maybe they'll prove me wrong. Either way, I mean, we've seen third parties come and go, and again, if you want them to become viable, you need electoral reform. I keep saying this, and third-party advocates don't like to listen, but it's true. Fight for electoral reform first, and then third parties will finally be viable. But even when we have viable third parties, that doesn't necessarily mean that they won't be susceptible to the same corruption that is inherent within our system that made the Democratic Party corrupt when they once were a more working-class friendly party.
Oh, there's that whole talking point once again about that talking point. Oh, third parties will get corrupt too. That's the exact talking point that people in the synthetic left like Mike will use to discourage you from trying to just at minimum vote for one or even support one. And the whole electoral reform spiel is another form of that discouragement, and he's punching in both directions here. And while he's not exactly wrong about the unseriousness of the Forward Party, at the same time, he's also not pointing out what positive impact it could have, if any. And I guess that would be, it could just be enough to weaken one of those two parties enough to open things up for someone on the left as well. But that's not a real conversation to be had because he still is putting this third party thing on too much of a pedestal and not just thinking about like the simple cause and effect that could happen if enough people just made a minimum form of investment, and that just means starting to be principled about a refusal to vote for the duopoly.
So this is like, you have to take a holistic approach if you genuinely want to revitalize the American political system. But I genuinely don't know if there's any hope, if it could be reformed or revitalized. So all of this just seems really pointless to me, but I don't want to rain on their parade. If it makes them happy, great. But I really don't want to see this party take advantage of well-intentioned people who are dissatisfied with the two-party system if this party is just going to offer them more of the same. I think that's really cruel. And yeah, so we'll continue to follow the Forward Party. It just seems dumb. Sorry.
And that right there is going to be the exact same thing. He's probably going to come out and smear whoever the top left third party candidate is in the 2024 election, because that's just what people like Mike Figueredo are just going to end up doing when it's all said and done. And even though Andrew Yang's third party is going to be antithetical to anything for the left, and in fact, Andrew Yang, if he gets successful enough, he could actually do a bit to help Democrats not lose to Donald Trump, in the same way that Joe Jorgensen and Kanye West did play a small role in those tight states that flipped to Joe Biden after election. And Andrew Yang already has a higher profile than, in terms of the political sphere, than both Jorgensen and Kanye West. And that's the thing that someone like Mike's not really going to acknowledge much. But just know that he's not really serious about the third party thing. He's going to put other obstacles and roadblocks in the way to make sure that it doesn't happen. That people do not seriously engage with the idea, even if it doesn't really get us any further than what we are now. But it's better than just continuing to vote within the duopoly, even if you're only conditionally voting blue. So to make that point, illustrate that point further, David Hogg is getting attacked again because he's now having his critical moment with the Democratic Party. So we'll just go to this little photo showing you some examples of those recent tweets. Burned a lot of bridges yesterday. My only regret is I didn't do it sooner. Half these Dems might as well be Republicans. At least they tell us directly to fuck off instead of promising survivors action then attempting to pull the rug from underneath. And honestly, I think even David is being far too generous when he says half. That's 95%. And even 95%, even 5% of those so-called Democrats may even be a bit too generous. Because the reality is it's really more like 98%. Because I think the elected progressives really only represent 2% of all of Congress. And for people who think that we still got time to reform the Democratic Party, 2% in just 6 years or so, not very inspiring to me. Here's another thing they won't tell you. Half them are basically Dems have done such a shit job of winning state legislators. These districts are basically a race to see who can be the most moderate GOP in the primaries, and for the right, who can be the most fascist. We have got to start winning state legislators and voting the furthest left candidates we can in safe primaries if we are ever going to save this country, right? Now, if Dems were a party in almost any EU, they'd be one of the most conservative parties in Europe. So there's a bunch of like half-truths and half wishful thinking that he points out. Though we know this is a typical cycle for him. A lot in the way that David Sirota enjoys the abusive relationship with shitlibs, but continues to not be ready to fully abandon the party and actually talk about things that seriously matter to marginalized communities. Like, when has he ever been critical of U.S. imperialism? Not very damn often. And well, we know that David here is always going to find a way to backtrack, because since he already admitted it between one of these similar types of rants, that he's just ultimately going to have to vote blue when it's said and done. And this is going to be one of the top examples of what happens when you still believe you have to conditionally vote blue for the progressive candidates. Because if you've listened to Kshama Sawant, you'll know the truth is that even if they manage to get through, the Democratic Party is a roadblock where progress goes to die. So this is why the whole reforming the Democratic Party as a pointless, futile exercise, more so than the idea of believing that we could use a third party as a tool of leverage, because that may have more of a chance to work, as opposed to using excuses and cheap hurting people against the idea of people throwing shit against the wall until something sticks. So earlier this week, Vladimir Zelinsky and his wife had photos released for a Vogue magazine shoot. And let's go through some of those photos, because some of this shit honestly makes me sick, because it continues to get liberals fawning in fucking worship over the man, who is just basically a puppet of this whole new proxy war, which is getting money sucked away from people here who really need it. And it's also being used towards Nazis who are fighting these people, and they're also committing hate acts against Russians that are in Ukraine, because they're a lot like Israel. They're like Israel in certain ways with the colonizing behavior. So let's go look at some of the photos, shall we? There's some funny ones too. But let's... I'm sorry, but I don't think... If there's anything we know about this Joe Biden, I don't think he would prefer to sniff Vladimir first, but I think cognitively speaking, he's probably old enough to where he may not care if he has to sniff through Vladimir first to get to his wife, since we know that he's a creepy sexual predator that was able to get away with it because he's a protected member of the powerful class. And we've seen that evidence clearly with Tara Reid, because they didn't give her a fair trial, and they used bullshit, irrelevant smears like not being evicted in order as a credible thing to discredit her when she came forward against Joe Biden. And by the way, Tara, thanks for following me on Twitter a couple days ago. I appreciate that, and I would hope to have Tara on the show sometime in the future. But I hope this channel grows a bit first before I make that happen. See, they mainly focus on... Here's another photo. Look at his sad wife for this watching this newly built U.S. war funded machine. That's what she's watching. And look at the look of apathy, because I'm sure that, as we notice, that in this proxy war, the U.S. is making a lot of these Ukrainian soldiers cannon fodder. And they, in Vogue magazine, thought it was so fucking cool to idolize this shit. Where this is honestly grotesque to see war get idolized like this. But corporate media propaganda is like the United States. They're just gonna choose the better side here, rather than being taking a principled stance against war. And there's his typical Peabody green t-shirt as the US media has tried so fucking hard to get this guy over like a new main event wrestler. I mean, look, he's like the modern 5'8", 180-pound small guy who does all the wild flippy shit on TV all the time. But the problem is this guy has no fucking charisma whatsoever when you hear him talk. But he just has the look of someone who's charismatic. And that's why it's easy for this corporate media machine to make him look like such a sympathetic figure while they make Vladimir Putin look like such an evil heel when you hear him talk, he actually sounds more reasonable than Zelinsky here. But there's another pretty good Photoshop. Trying to find the one where they lay out all the cash on the table. Let me continue looking for this. But this is what happens when your brain is on propaganda. They have you worshipping the shit the same way that you do your favorite like Netflix and new Disney Plus releases. Here it is. They put a whole table of money. Like he's a new member of the money team. Because he has the aura of someone who would fit that group very well. And this is the type of symbolism it should represent is all the money that the United States said that they didn't have for the people to help combat inflation, to help increase hospitals and healthcare. There's so much that the United States could be doing better by its people right now. And let that money be representative of what they would rather burn in a idiotic war where they think they're sanctioning Russia, but it's really just a double-edged sword that hurts the United States and the other fellow NATO countries in the process. Because this war machine bullshit is idiotic. And it's going to get worse for people in Europe especially. It hasn't really started yet. And yet we got fucking shitlibs who are excited over a temporary drop in gas when I bet you it's just a temporary dip, and that's going to go up too. Because that was an annoying ass trend where they tried to celebrate the little drop in the gas. But yet, even in a place like California or the most expensive states in gas, you're not noticing that much of a difference. But sure, liberals, keep celebrating. Keep worshipping a captured politician who's another useful tool for the U.S. war rackets. That's really helpful right now. So, but we got actual black socialists who question this war narrative between Russia and Ukraine. And guess what's happened to them? We got to touch a bit on this too. the Uhuru movement. So this little video right here, Fiorella Isabel of RT is going to interview Caleb Maupin, and it's going to go a bit into detail of the whole FBI raid of the Black Socialist Uhuru movement.
For more, let's cross live to RT's Caleb Maupin. Caleb, what do we know about Ionov, and why is the U.S. government so concerned?
Well, Alexander Ionov is the leader of an NGO called the Anti-Globalization Movement. And today, the U.S. Department of Justice and the U.S. attorneys in Florida indicted him for allegedly conspiring to meddle in U.S. politics, to encourage Americans to distrust the government, to interfere in U.S. elections, etc. And they leveled these allegations against him. He's based in Moscow. And they essentially are accusing him of these crimes. He is indicted. Now, at the same time that these indictments came down, there were raids against various political groups in the United States that the U.S. Department of Justice alleges are linked to Ionov and his alleged foreign meddling. And in response to that, we have seen quite a bit of outcry. Now, we understand that one of the groups that was targeted was the Uhuru House, which is the headquarters of the African People's Socialist Party, which is a black nationalist and socialist organization that has been operating in the United States over the past few decades. The longtime leader of that organization, Omali Yeshiteli, and his wife were taken out of the headquarters at gunpoint and handcuffed. We understand there was the use of some flashbangs as well as drones that were used in the raid. It was quite an intense display of force by U.S. law enforcement against this political group. And the leaders of this political group say this is rooted in the failures of the U.S. government and the U.S. system, not any crime they're alleged to have participated in. This is what we heard from representatives of the Uhuru movement.
But one, I think that this exposes the crisis that the U.S. imperialism is in. Because the U.S. and other world colonial powers have been collaborating against Russia for early into the early 1900s. And this is a consequence right now in 2022 that we see the same attack against Russia. And right now, this war with Ukraine, this defensive war in Ukraine that Russia is actually waging against world colonial powers, not Ukraine as a single entity, but the U.S. and all colonial powers who have an interest in colonially dominating African people right here in this country and around the world and extracting resources from the majority of the peoples on the planet. That system, this current system, is in severe crisis, and they cannot rule in the same old way.
Now, there is a long...
That right there is the truth. She accurately called it out in the correct way. The whole bullshit framing that we've been told about this Russia and Ukraine war, when it was actually Ukraine Russia was actually willing to come to the table for a diplomatic solution, and they still are. But it's because of the U.S. war machine that and pushing Ukraine to keep this shit going. That's the reason why Russia is in the place it is, defending the Donbass and other independent districts on the border between the two areas. They're trying to protect those people. But the thing is, they want you to just think Russia is just doing their own form of imperialism, when with the way that things are playing out, they're actually, even though Russia and China do have their differences, with the way that the United States is so against those two countries, that forces them to have like a Oddfellows type of coalition against the United States. And that's a thing that should scare people here in the United States, is with the way that they're trying to wage war against Russia and China, that they're actually going to create some weird coalitions to come out against the United States. And that's the reason why I want the United States to stop this shit. It's because of the fact that if the United States thinks that they can just overpower and bully everyone in the world, then it's eventually going to backfire on them if they continue to think that they can do that. And that there's going to be a coalition, a counter coalition towards the United States and NATO if this whole World War III shit really pops off. And no reasonable person who is principled on this wants to see that happen. But yet we still have countless rallies, pro-Ukraine rallies, where it's essentially demanding it. And that's fucking sickening.
History of black activists in the United States being accused of working for Russia. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was alleged to have been a communist and a Soviet agent. Similar allegations were thrown at Malcolm X and other black leaders, the Black Panthers and others. Now, this organization, the Uhuru movement, makes a point of saying that they did not accept any money from the Russian government. However, they are not opposed to receiving financial support from individuals who want to battle against what they call the colonial powers that dominate the world, and they view the black nation within the United States as struggling against. Now, at this point, we're seeing this indictment against Ianov, and the indictment essentially says that he could serve up to 5 years in prison for allegedly conspiring to utilize American political organizations in some kind of malign influence operation. That is what is alleged. The indictment names 3 political organizations in the United States as unindicted co-conspirators. It does not name the organizations. Their names are redacted from the report, but it is understood that one of them is the Uhuru movement, whose headquarters was raided today in a brutal display of force by American law enforcement.
RT's Caleb Maupin, thank you.
Yeah, and this is the type of shit that they don't want you to focus on, because what you'll realize is if you got to see what happens here, you'll actually notice that the Uhuru movement actually connects things, and colonism as the major problems that we are facing today. And Russia is currently part of that colonizing movement. If anything, Ukraine is the new, as I said, they're the new left-hand man in imperialism. And it's because they're the ones that are ramped up the colonizing behavior, starting with the coup back in 2014. And they're right to point out the major problems of colonism that are the root of many of the problems, especially those that Black Americans face here in the United States. And it should be very dystopian to think about how they'll take this, the FBI will take this more seriously, but they'll just sit back and not do shit when it comes to taking real action on a potential mass shooter. That's right, that's what they'll focus on, because they show their capability of what they're supposed to function as when they try to take down the left. But since they view shootings as fine, or the white supremacist groups that exist here in the United States, they treat that shit with kid gloves. And it also goes to show you that if you're saying something right in this moment, then you are going to get smeared as a Putin puppet, a Russian propagandist. Because look at this. This is what they don't want you to know, or what's going on. Or if they do allow you to find out, they're using this shit as a Red Scare, McCarthyite smearing. That's how they intend to use moments like this. not to open you up to the inherent flaws of the way that the United States and the NATO countries are framing this whole Ukraine-Russia proxy war. So on Thursday, there was a congressional baseball game at National Stadium in D.C. And some climate activists came to try to have a moment, raise awareness. So let's start here. See how quickly the fucking pigs come to take away the flags that they're holding up? Just know that this is not a unique phenomenon. This is a pretty normal feature of sports. Whenever you see people hold up signs that make political statements, guess who shuts it down?
What do we do? Climate justice is under attack. What do we do? Justice is under attack. What do we do? Climate justice is under attack. What do we do?
See, this right here shows you See, this is the fascist police state on display. Their purpose, first and foremost, is to protect the interest of the ruling class and their property. And when you threaten that, first and foremost, that's when the police look competent. That's when they look serious and credible in taking action. But as we've seen with shootings like Uvalde, or when the white nationalists are involved and white supremacists, they have a much more casual kid gloves type of approach to them. And look here. And where's the people on the right, as Nick Cruz would say, are the so-called free speech warriors? Where's their outrage? Because what time and time again you often see is they're just largely content with the whole, as long as it doesn't affect my right-wing speech, I'm good. If they clamp down on free speech of liberals and the left. That's why you hardly see any right-wingers speak out about Julian Assange, who should be one of the top people of priority. That's why you don't see them speak out about Abdu Mumia Jamal either. Several whistleblowers and political prisoners that they could be advocating for if they were actually principled about free speech. But no, this is, in fact, many of them are probably glad because sports are my space to escape from politics. Which, as someone who started the show to give more focus on stories that intersect with sports, sports have always been very inherently political. But here's the caveat of a difference that I like to point out. When a player has much more latitude to make political statements on the field of play. Because when fans try to do it, look how quickly they send the force out to shut that shit down. But look, if an actual MLB player wanted to wear an arm sleeve on the client on the same related issue, they could have that on the whole game. Of course, they risk a fine, but I think if you're actually serious about the cause you're behind, then that fine won't matter. And another reason is, another big purpose for me doing this channel is when it comes to these sports stories, they actually need left criticism of these moments out in the media space, not just liberal praise and right-wing attacks. As you've seen a few weeks ago when Steve Kerr and Gabe Kapler made their statements on following the Uvalde shooting, I gave them the left criticism of the action they should take. Not have it just not go anywhere beyond a performative outrage, that it was an opportunity for them to try to push for a strike. But the conditions of this moment make it to where they're not really brave enough to go all the way to that point. And part of that reason is this fascist police state makes some people who may be more ambitious in trying to fight for things be leery and get cold feet. But there's still some more videos from this congressional baseball game to go through. So let's go here. So here's, I'm just going to point it out, just because of the stupidness of your right-wing clowns like Benny Johnson. It's the fact that they only care about this 10-0 win from a team sports type of perspective. They're not going to give you any serious type of analysis of the events that happened here. And oh yeah, let's continue to praise the money that your grift brings in. Look, I'm so cool. I did a sports thing. I nearly mauled over a catcher. Don't you like me now? And I know that there were... Wait, I think this is another different video. Oh, lame. Thought that was something interesting. As you can see, once you got outside the stadium, they even clamped down on more.
It's going to be Jeffries. And she will come off to a nice ovation.
Well,
not much reaction from the Republican side. Kind of off to lead off the inning. We'll get a pinch runner down there, the fist bump. We'll get an eye on who the pinch runner is going to be. It looks like it's going to be Jeffries. And she will come off to a nice ovation. Well, not much reaction from the...
So this video is just going to get you into the whole unproductive culture war thing that the Democrats and Republicans have you on. Oh, she's such a bad sport. She flipped someone off. Is what often Republicans do is the whole... They try to monopolize outrage. That way they make all liberals sound extremely deranged when they do it. And there's some degree of truth to that. Because when the left is outraged, they are pretty much spreading that out to liberals and conservatives very much equally. So I just thought it was another one of those stupid moments where conservatives get off of being outraged over some stupid, insignificant stuff and celebrating meaningless victories. Like getting Joe Biden to say, "Let's go, Brandon." There's really conservatives who consider that to be one of the biggest victories that the right has had since Joe Biden has taken office, because they are so ignorant to how very much alike to Donald Trump Joe Biden is, and how Joe Biden has been more effective than Donald Trump in certain ways, especially with that recent border funding that he actually got passed. Look outside of the stadium. Look at how quickly the pigs pounce on someone when it's a protester for climate action. Look how fucking quickly that happens. And compare that to how slowly it takes for a climate, or a mass shooter, a white supremacist. It's because the police force is interwoven with white supremacy. You see why we talk about police abolition? Because it is a tool of white supremacy. And that tool of white supremacy is going to come out and protect those interests right away. And yes, this tool of white supremacy, the reason why it's effective is they get people who aren't white to participate in the system. And that's the one distinct difference that liberals can't convey very effectively. So that's why they instead get caught up in praising the promotion of different faces in these places. And this is Then another sign that got taken down with the quickness. And then the unfortunate part is that
We know that Mitchell, Biden, and Schumer are playing with our lives. We know that the promises that they've made to us are not going to be fulfilled. We need Biden to declare a climate emergency. We cannot accept half measures. We cannot accept promises. We need real action now. What do we do when our communities are under attack? What do we do?
although I get why they're there, but I also understand that this went through the House successfully. It passed the House, but we know that nothing's going to get done in Senate ultimately, and it's going to be ending up a pretty milquetoast bill overall when it's all said and done. If just because of a Joe Manchin type is going to water down that climate bill even further than what it came through the House. But there's liberals who are also pretty fine with the whole thing.
About it, we're screwed. This is not enough. Yes, still the Joe and private, but also.
And I'm out here today because we need to pass climate legislation, not tomorrow, not today, yesterday. The climate crisis is the biggest existential crisis that every single living thing on Earth is facing right now. And if we don't do something about it, we're screwed.
This is not enough. Yes, still the Joe and private, but also declare a climate emergency. Shut it down! If we don't get it, shut it down! If we don't get it, shut it down!
We need a new system. We need system change, not climate change.
And I'm out here today because we need to pass climate legislation.
So just know that it's going to be a really uphill battle to get that ball moving forward. But this goes to show you the fascist police force that we're dealing with at our hands. Just look at how quickly they shut the shit down inside the stadium, and how they'll look to start shit with people, even if they're not being unpeaceful. Just because that is a feature by design of the police state. And we got a lot of major problems on climate. I haven't done a lot of coverage in specific on it, but I do know that whatever is being negotiated, if anything, which when it's all said and done, I doubt this is just another bill that dies in the Senate. That if they did anything at all, it would just be a compromise to the corporations who are making this climate worse. But at the same time, you know what would help the climate a lot? Abolishing the military-industrial complex, the CIA, the FBI, all those state institutions that perform very harming effects on the climate, while wagging their finger down at us to do individual actions like not using electricity or water at certain times. When they're the biggest polluter, or one who isn't being the most energy efficient, that's who are the unserious ones on climate change are. And that's why, once again, I'll make this point once again, like I did similarly to Jon Stewart in the beginning of the show. I hope that there's people involved in that climate movement that are trying to get people to connect towards other issues, because I think a climate movement should also be very connected to a anti-war movement. Those two things should go very hand in hand. And there's a lot of things right now that should go very hand in hand in this uphill fight that we're facing right now. And certain people are only going to have enough energy to focus on one of the movements at a time. But I think that they should at minimum be able to try to boost the other related movements in the process. And I think that there are people who are capable of doing that. It's a example of why we should be walking and chewing gum as much as possible, and that anyone who complains about those who choose to do that are just using CIA-type tactics to try to make things counterproductive and hold us up from trying to make progress. So with that being said, that's it for today's episode of the Rochford Files with your host, Andrew Rochford. Please also, for those of you who came in late, like the stream, try to find some new people to share the content to, whether it's like your people on Twitch, Facebook, Discord, wherever you're in a group. Try to spread the content of other similar channels as well, like INN, Revolutionary Blackout Network. There's a lot of people out there who need their content to grow too. And also, I gotta think of something to do for a 30-minute little show on locals sometime in the week. I'll do a little something for locals. It'll probably just be like a segment that I could fit into a 30-minute stream. But for those of you who missed it, I'll show you again at the end. I just started a locals channel last night. So this is how the locals channel looks. There it is, the Rochford Files. Those are the few similar channels I could think of that are also on the platform too. But it's another new opportunity to see if I can bring some more people in. So have a good rest of your weekend, everyone. Go to the link tree in the description and make sure to go to all the links related to the Rochford Files. And I'll see you again either on Tuesday or Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern. This is Andrew Rochford saying goodbye and good night.